Team up, dream up. For girls, finding your team is game-changing, which is why Metrobank are championing the growth of women and girls cricket across England and Wales. Their mission is to create a brighter future for girls through cricket in partnership with the ECB. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. Lots to get through today. In part one, Lauren Winfield-Hill and Katya Witney chat through the last two England-India games, the last ball thriller at Edgbaston and India's win in the opening ODI in Southampton. In part two, Katya chats to Lauren Parfitt and Flora Bertwistle about life in Tier 2. And to end the show, I speak to Surrey's Kira Chathli about Surrey's successful Blast campaign so far ahead of finals day next weekend. We've had two England games since we last chatted. The thriller in the final T20I with that manic final over, and then the first ODI yesterday that India won relatively comfortably in the end. Lord, what do you make of England in ODI cricket at the moment? Because we had the West Indies series where it didn't feel like we learned a lot. And here, England lose 2 wickets early on. They do pretty well, actually, to get up to 260-odd in the end. It could easily have been a game where you rolled for 150, 200. Lamb bats nicely, Sivir bats nicely, Dunkley scores 83, good support from ADR as well. But with a bowling all-rounder at 7, having lost those 2 early, they always had a lot of chasing to do in this game.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to know where they're at, isn't it? Because they absolutely smashed West Indies and we didn't really learn an awful lot apart from the openers can score a truckload of runs against the West Indies. And I think it's just about trying to quickly, I guess the issue is at the minute, and that's been spoken about a lot, in the fact of the way the series is balanced in terms of more T20s and ODIs, is you haven't got a lot of time to have a look at what your best team is, your best 11. And like you say, it's and what the balance of and the configuration of that best 11 looks like. Like we've spoken about Nat not bowling, and how that just adjusts the team quite a lot. But like as you say, I think they're absolutely crying out for somebody like a Danny Gibson, who I know is not available. She's still injured. She's a fair way off being able to bowl again. I know she's back playing batting. But it's that sort of package player where they could bowl 10 overs, but they're very capable with the bat and offer a lot in the field as well. With ADR not bowling or not bowling much, even for Surrey, she's not bowled an awful lot. It sort of still doesn't quite balance out quite right.
I know they scored millions of runs against West Indies, but in one, I think it was the first game, they did actually bide their time for quite a long time. They batted at 4, not much more than 4 and over before really accelerating. It does feel like even this early on under Edwards, there's a slightly different identity about how they're approaching 50 overs. There's a bit more care. They didn't go harder when the going got tough yesterday. And even though they did lose, they kept themselves in the game that started very badly.
Yeah, and I think that's like Lottie's been pretty open about in 50 over cricket. I think there was some sort of stat where England had historically sort of been mid-game and always been 4 or 5 down in the last little while. It's like 30 overs and they were pretty much always sort of 4 or 5 down, which means that you then got your bowlers back ending the game. And she's spoken a little bit about how they need to be better than that. If they want to beat the best teams in the world, you've got to have your top 5 or 6 batting 40 overs, and doing a chunk of the work. And it's about getting big scores, not starts. Like I think under John Lewis, it was more, he would be happy if you got 30 off 20 in an ODI, whereas Lottie wants, 85s, 100s. Off whether if you go at a 75 strike rate, that's fine, but she wants big contributions from the batters. And I think it's always a fine, it's one of those things where you've gone from one extreme to another with the coaching philosophy. So you've basically gone from, as long as there's intent, you're fine, you can't lose. To actually, this is a stats game, and we want the top 5, top 6 to do the heavy lifting. And as a player, that's actually quite hard because you've gone from one extreme to the other of going, well, as long as my intent's right, then I'm sweet, to actually, we're saying that the intent might come down, but we want the batters to go bigger, to make bigger contributions. And we've seen that against the West Indies, but it's not exactly a real test of, can you actually do that under more pressure.
How does it work? I just got a question about batting tempo. How does it work in a dressing room with a coach getting across the desired approach? Does a coach generally say, this is how I want my team to bat across 50 overs? Then as a player, is it sometimes quite difficult having to adapt to instructions around tempo? Because I suppose normally you just want to do your own thing.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it's interpretation and language. I think sometimes, people, like I know personally, sometimes if people, like a coach would say to me about batting time and going big and taking it deep and all that, sometimes I'd lose my intent and actually my positive movements and, getting immersed in the game, and really competing. Yeah, I feel like I would be like, oh yeah, we'll just sort of see what happens. Whereas when you've got somebody that's very much about taking the game on, being brave, being entertaining, all that sort of language that was used, is your tempo's like, all right, wham, bam, let's go. And then you've probably got, to be honest, like in one day cricket, it's probably somewhere in the middle, in terms of you've still got to move well, make good decisions, like try and put the bowlers under pressure, but you're just trying to repeat that your way for longer before it's like don't crack. Who cracks first in one day cricket? And yeah, it's about getting that tempo right. And I think one person that's like deserves a lot of plaudits is Dunkley. Like, in terms of the way she's turned it around, came in at a crucial time and had a crucial knock yesterday. But just showing that she can go up and down the tempos. We see in T20 cricket, she goes, she probably hasn't been as aggressive and taken as much risk this summer as she has previously, but that's probably given her more success. And then obviously being able to play an innings like yesterday, just shows the sort of change in tempo.
On that point about Sophia Dunkley yesterday, it very much looked like I was at utility yesterday, and it very much looked like around the 40 over mark there was a bit of a break where there were the subfielder came out to run the drinks, and it looked like there was an instruction from the dressing room to kind of up the tempo a little bit. And Dunkley was in the post match presser and didn't deny that had happened. So there was some kind of instruction at that point to up the tempo, and you could see as soon as that message came out, because they had been kind of knocking it about, and then Davidson Richards started to try and hit out a bit more and eventually got out doing that. And then Dunkley, and they promoted Sophie Eccleston up the order as well, above Charlie Dean, as that kind of power hitter. Because while we've talked about Charlie Dean as being a good option to bat up the order in ODIs before on this podcast, if you want that kind of acceleration, you're going to go to Sophie Eccleston over Dean. So it looked like there was clear intent from the dressing room at that point to realise that we need to get the score up here. And they did finish about 30 runs short anyway, but it was 260 rather than 220.
Yeah, I think, and it's about finding the blueprint, isn't it? It's about, the blueprint of the team might be where you want your top order to bat 35 overs. And if you're 3 or 4 down at 35 overs, then you can really make inroads. And I think that always sort of was the way in which 50 over cricket was played. I know, like when I played, that was what we were trying to do, is we were trying to back end it, but make sure that we'd have the batters doing the work. And getting through that sort of first 35, not getting through because you're trying to set the game up. Like, it's very difficult to have, to go at 8s, 9s, 10s for 10 overs with your bowlers. But that's very achievable if you've still got a batter and a set batter. So I think, yeah, like I say, it's about them understanding what each phase almost stands for. All right, well, the first 10 is right, well, let's just assess what's going on. Okay, let's try and build a partnership. You're trying to come out unscathed, and then you sort of, right now you're picking up the tempo, and it's gradually building and building, rather than if you're losing big clumps of wickets, you're like this the whole way and you sort of don't actually kick on.
you mentioned Danny Gibson being a potential big miss for England at the moment. Someone on the India team who's had a really good tour, Amanjot Kaur, who England fans might not have seen much of before. She's been really good as someone who's able to contribute low order runs, but also very handy option with the ball. Having someone with that all-round ability makes a very, very big difference at 50 over side.
Yeah, and T20 as well. Like I remember seeing her in the WPL for the Mumbai Indians, and she hadn't had loads of opportunity because they're pretty stacked. But my first thought was, gee, she's a good athlete. Like she was gun in the field. But yeah, she's that package, isn't she? She's that sort of player that when Nat's not bowling and Danny Gibson's out injured, you got a little bit of that in MR lot and a little bit of that in ADR, but you don't have the whole of it in either of them. And yeah, she's been a great find because, like you say, she can bowl anywhere. She can open the bowl and she can bowl sort of first change. They used her quite differently across the T20s as well. And yeah, obviously, like she just adds a lot to the fielding as well, I think. But yeah, it's that sort of mold that England are just missing a little bit at the minute. But she's been a great, and it's amazing how much more balanced your side gets from having like a Deepti Sharma who's now a genuine all-rounder. Because India do have quite a lot of out and out single skill players in that top 5 or 6. You've got Jemmy, you've got Smriti, you've got Harman. They're all pretty much single skill players. So your all-rounders are like gold dust.
Katya, there was a very fun T20 game towards the end of last week. England winning at the very end off the last ball off a truly chaotic final few minutes, drop catches, missed run out chances, the lot. It's good for England to get that win under the belt because it had otherwise been a pretty difficult series for them.
Yeah, no, it was good for them to get that win under their belt, and it looks like the series scoreline looks a lot better with that win rather than what it could have been. I think the T20 series is kind of like, this feels like the meatier part of the series now with that World Cup coming up in a few months' time. And while the T20 series is a lot of food for thought, I feel like that series can almost be parked now as you focus on the ODI format and then pick up that thread again afterwards for the T20 World Cup next year. So there's a lot of threads from that. But I think if you're looking at the overall positives, we've already talked about, let's try and be positive about England's T20 for once in the series. If you're looking at what we've already said about Sophia Dunkley's played a really good innings, and there was a really good partnership between her and Wyatt Hodge at the top of that order. And given that we were saying before the T20 at the Oval that Danny Wyatt Hodge's place might be under threat in the ODI lineup, I think she's managed to not completely erase all of those questions, but she's definitely put herself back firmly in that T20 opener spot for at least a little bit to come. Also seeing Maya Bouchier back in the side as well, that's interesting. She scored a load of runs for Hampshire and obviously has a really good relationship with Charlotte Edwards, so seeing her back as well is good. I think we've got to think about Paige Schofield as well, obviously coming in for the series, having been that player who's always kind of not found her way into the final 11 over the last 6 months or so. She's one who you would have hoped would have grabbed that opportunity and that place to lock down a position in that middle order, and she hasn't quite done that. So what the T20 future holds for her, or the immediate T20I future holds for her, is a question. Alice Capsey was also dropped for that final game, and that looks like it was a decision based on performance rather than on team balance, because England played all 3 spinners in that final T20. So that's another one to think about going forward as to what Alice Capsey's inclusion is going to be in both the ODI side and the T20 side, because she wasn't playing ODI cricket either. So yeah, there's lots of interesting things that you can take from that T20 series and lots of things going forward that England will need to address. But the ODI series is now the big thing, the big questions that need answering ahead of the World Cup. And it feels like as well, Edwards made a massive point about ODI cricket and how England want to play ODI cricket going forward. And that's kind of what we need to be focused on now.
It's amazing that there are only 2 games left of this English summer and it's July the 17th and there's a World Cup straight after it. It feels like there's a lot to learn in a very short space of time. Lauren, once again, fielding has come into the spotlight. India dropped a few catches yesterday. in Southampton, and there are lots of drop catches in the T20 series too. I know we talked about it during the T20 World Cup, and there's a lot of chat around how the stadium at Dubai in particular is notorious for being a difficult ground to catch at. And also we've talked before about how, relatively speaking, there are very few domestic women's games that are played at night, whereas internationally there are a lot of them. There was an interesting conversation in the commentary box yesterday where they're talking about whether the balls are the right size, and basically saying that, relatively speaking, women's cricket balls are actually not that far off the size of men's cricket balls, but the average size of a man's hand versus the average size of a woman's hand is much bigger than that gap. Do you think there's anything in that? Because that's not something I've heard discussed on TV before.
Yeah, that's I'm sort of smirking a bit there. I've not heard that before. I don't think players ever really considered that or thought that that's an issue, to be honest. I mean, the thing that's hard fielding under lights is that you lose the ball in the lights, and the depth perception of a white ball coming out of a night sky. That's the hard bit. I don't think the size of the ball has ever been a consideration. I don't think it's an issue at all. I mean, we can always find things to change if we want to change things, but I don't think it's more challenging fielding under lights because you lose the ball in the lights and the depth perception changes. Like, it's on you a lot quicker. You think that, you think you're taking a catch, and you're seeing it travel, and it's just on you a lot quicker than you think under the night sky and that perception. And some people struggle with that more than others. Some players will play with like the lenses on, and they'll struggle with. A really interesting thing actually was when we get our eyes done, tested with the opticians through England. They do some testing where they almost blind you. They flash a light, and then how quickly you can then read the letters or see, almost refocus. So, as a little insight, is like some people take longer than others, like for their eyesight to actually refocus after you've been dazzled. So things like that, that's the challenges. It's not necessarily the size of the ball. On the fielding thing, though, I do think Maya Boucher made a difference the other night at Edgbaston. I thought England were much better in the field. It was good to get the win. It wasn't overly convincing, to be honest. Like, I think there's a lot that still needs dissecting. It was probably more of a nice big exhale than it was a fulfilling victory, But I do think that Maya Boucher and the fielding in that last game was certainly improved. And it's really interesting, right? Because when we were talking at Manchester about the fielding, so there'd been 8 drop catches in the series to that point for England. 6 of those came in the second half of the game, so in the last 10 overs. So the point of pressure being ramped up because the game's on the line, etc., etc. England obviously fielded first in that last one, so they're under less pressure in that skill. So it's all the time. It's not about the skill. It's this link into when we're under pressure. But I do think they were much improved in that last T20.
Katya, you've been doing some digging into what life is like in Tier 2. Obviously, Lauren has her own experience, but you've been speaking, or you're about to speak to and read about players from counties other than Yorkshire and Glamorgan who are tracking to be Tier 1.
Yeah, so one of the players I'm speaking to is actually from Glamorgan. So Lauren Parfitt is Glamorgan captain. And also speaking to, so you'll hear her later in this episode. You'll also hear from Flora Bertwistle, who sounds like she's got a really interesting story. She's currently studying for a PhD in neuroinflammation, which I'm hoping I've got right, because that's something I've got absolutely no clue about.
I sort of think when someone can do that, just do that. It's better than cricket.
Yeah.
It's like that's a better life than cricket.
Yeah. I wouldn't be chasing a stitched leather ball around a field if I had those brains.
Yeah, so you'll be hearing from those two later on in the pod. And I wanted to get a feel for what this year's Tier 2 has been like, because while we've heard a lot about Tier 1 cricket and it's been on, been on TV and been on the live streams, we haven't heard a lot about what's going on in Tier 2. And I think there's 2 stories that go on in Tier 2 for me. there's Yorkshire and Glamorgan, who are obviously getting promoted or set to be promoted to Tier 1 next year and 2027 respectively. And Yorkshire have dominated that North group, as you would expect. And then there's what happens to the competition when those two counties have been promoted, and what does that competition become. So one of the interesting ones for me was that Middlesex are currently leading the South group. So they beat Glamorgan in a thriller in their first match of the season and have gone unbeaten, I think, after that. And are still leading the group. They've got some quite good players playing for them. So specifically, I think they've got Saskia Hawley playing for them, who's played WBBL and played Australia under-19s, played for Scotland. And there's such a huge mix of players in Tier 2. You've got the young players coming through. You've got players who've played county cricket for a really long time, but that is their level and that's what they're going to be for the rest of their careers. And then you've got these kind of mix of really quite good players who have in some cases played international cricket also playing. So it's a really odd mix. But that will change when Yorkshire and Glamorgan go up. And I think what people need to remember is that this is actually an amateur competition. I think or a semi-professional competition, I think, is the better way to phrase it. And I think when the plan for Project Darwin or the restructure came out, it's quite easy to think, women's cricket in England, it's fully professional now, but it's not. This chunk of the Blast, and the Blast is one of the flagship competitions of the summer, is not a professional competition, especially given that they're being put on the same stage as the men's Blast. So the Worcester Rapids and Glamorgan playing at Sapphire Gardens, playing at Lords alongside Middlesex, and this is essentially a semi-professional competition. And speaking off the record to a player a couple of weeks ago, she said that it's not actually been that much different from what life was like under the regional system, as in the Tier 1 hubs pretty much dictating who's playing in the Tier 2 teams, and using it almost as a breeding ground for Tier 1 players coming through, which in some ways is a very good thing, because you don't want players who aren't getting Tier 1 cricket sitting around in the nets and not getting match time. It's very good that they're then getting match time. But I think this was billed as kind of like Tier 2 Blast and Tier 1 Blast. And I think it's important to establish that Tier 2 is essentially going to become a feeder competition for the Tier 1 Blast rather than anything else. So there was a chat about promotion and relegation when we first started talking about the Blast. I don't think that is ever going to happen. Beth Barrett-Wild said at the time that that was a competition, that was an issue for the future, but I don't think that practically can ever happen given what we think is going to happen with the Tier 2 Blast. I don't know what impression you've got from it from the Yorkshire dressing room, Lauren, but that's certainly the impression that I've got.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point you make as well, because I think as soon as you go double headers with the men and you're sort of getting a little bit more exposure, then you automatically make the assumption that the training, the support, the financial rewards, etc., is all changed just because you're playing at a county ground and you're a curtain raiser to the men's game. And I think it's a really good point that you make, is that it's still very mismatched. You know, you talk about Yorkshire having good success in the North Group, so they should, because if you put what's been fed into Yorkshire and what's been fed into a lot of the other teams, you know, it's massive difference. So I think, yeah, sometimes you forget that just because you're playing on more major grounds and you're playing before the men and that sort of stuff, that the support, the structure, the opportunity to train, things like that have all changed. Well, actually, you know, for most counties, not a lot has changed, you know, in terms of they're probably still doing their 9 to 5s. They're training maybe a couple of times a week if you're lucky. And then you're obviously playing games. People would have to take days off work to play games. So I think, yeah. And with that, you know, like, say if Yorkshire and Glamorgan go up and then you want to do this like promotion and relegation thing. So what are you going to promote? Somebody that doesn't have a professional structure, that trains once a week and everyone has to take time off work to then play Tier 1 cricket, which is 2 or 3 times a week for 4 or 5 months. Like, it's just not feasible. It makes no sense. And then you can't drop down a Tier 1 team to play. You know, it just has to be a level playing field. Like, everybody has to have the same opportunities to train, to make it a full-time living, you know, and that should be safeguarded in terms of, you know, the teams not going up and down.
I think the facilities point is a really good one, because when you look at obviously Yorkshire at Headingley, Glamorgan at Cardiff at Sapphire Gardens, you've also obviously got Middlesex at Lords, who are going to stay in Tier 2. compared to a Worcester, for example, at New Road. And facilities was something that was made a big deal of when this structure first came in, and upgrading all those facilities. But I think it's easy to forget that those facilities weren't all equal in the first place among men's sides. So upgrading women's facilities to match their men's facilities doesn't look the same at every club. You can think about the Oval that's now got fancy new dressing rooms and all of that, and probably the same is happening at Lords in Tier 2, but that's not going to look the same at Kent or at Leicestershire. Leicester, by the way, have done a really good job in the South Group. They look dead on to qualify for finals day, and Worcester is still in contention for that, so that would also be a really good story if they do. I'm struggling to understand why finals day for the Tier 2 comp is I think it's definitely 2 semi-finals and a final, having looked at it, and Tier 1 teams rather than 4 teams, so that's a difference across the two competitions as well.
Yeah, I don't mind in Tier 1, if you've topped the group, you go straight to the final. I think you get some competitions where you can do quite badly and then still end up in the final, depending on how the knockouts go. So I think you should be rewarded for coming first.
The Big Bash meant you can play about 4 finals before the final. You can have about 3 stabs at finals.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, that's it for this section. Next up, we'll hear from Bertwistle and Parfitt about their experiences in Tier 2.
Lauren, just going back to the start of the season before we get to where you are now, you were named Glamorgan's first ever professional women's captain ahead of this season. In the context of the time you've spent at the club, could you explain what that meant to you?
Oh, look, a huge honour for me to captain Glamorgan, something that I will be really forever be proud of. It wasn't until the other day when someone actually sent me a photo of my name on the board with both Sam and Kieran that it kind of sunk in. To be the first women's captain and be up there on that board kind of forever is such a surreal feeling, and something that, like I said, I will forever be proud of. And I know that, my family and friends are also something that they're really proud of as well.
And looking at the season as a whole, as it's gone so far, what's made that kind of possible is that we have got a new system. Has it lived up to your expectations ahead of the season?
Oh, 100%. Look, when we started the season, there was a little bit of the unknown in terms of new team and people coming in, as well as what does cricket look like in Tier 2, as well as what does cricket look like in Tier 1. And for us, I think as a team, we're in a really good place to be able to play good cricket like we have done this season, but also with that kind of that is the Tier 1 is what we're aspiring, and will be in anyway. So to have that kind of standard to look up to is really important for the whole group.
And with that tag of being alongside Yorkshire, but in a different group in the Blast scheme of things, going up to Tier 1 in 2027, did that add pressure in terms of being expected to almost dominate the competition for the Blast anyway?
I don't know. I don't think so. We've talked a lot about, we want to play our kind of brand of cricket, and the way we go about that is by keeping it simple and doing the simple things well and playing good cricket, which we have done. The rest, everything else that goes on around us is we kind of ignore that. It is what it is. People will say there's extra added pressure, but it's not something that the group kind of feel. It's just for us keeping the basic things right and keeping playing the good cricket that we are.
And we should say that Glamorgan are currently in second place in the South Group and have qualified for finals day already, which at the time of recording is in about a week's time. So when you're hearing this, it will be a week and 1 day's time. Aside from purely the points aspect of it, how would you assess the side's performance in the competition?
I don't think, the game we played against Middlesex first off wasn't how we wanted to start. But I think for me, the way that we then went about our cricket after that, to go back and beat them in the capacity that we did and kind of continue that run of winning games, for me has been, superb from the group. Everyone has contributed, whether it be with bat or with ball. And we've worked really hard as a group in terms of, our fielding and making sure that is up to scratch. And look, the wins that we've put in as a group, I can't really ask any more of the girls because, they've done their bit.
Aside from winning, for this season, it feels like it would have been a lot about bridging that gap to Tier 1 or figuring out what you need to do in order to make yourselves ready to be in Tier 1 after next year. How would you assess it's gone from that side of things?
I think we're in a really good place. We still know that there will be challenges ahead in terms of, playing at finals day with the extra added pressure of a semi-final and a final, brings the added pressure. But I hope that, we take that kind of in our stride. We're such a group of young cricketers who some people will have maybe played in finals, some people not so much. So how the group copes with that will definitely be interesting. But I think we have the skill set and testament and want and will to win, that kind of they will take that in their stride. And moving forward on from that, obviously we've got 50 over cricket to play as well. So hopefully we can carry on the positive form that we take from the Blast into that as well.
Having played nearly, 3/4 of a season in this system now, what do you think the main differences are or will be between playing in Tier 1 and playing in Tier 2?
I just think that just generally the standard, probably from a batter's perspective, probably going to face bowlers that are quicker in the pace department, probably turn the ball more. I think the fielding is another kind of step up. We're talking about professional athletes who it's your job to play cricket. So I think there'll be a big change when it does happen to, we go from Tier 2 to Tier 1, but I think it's just going to be really exciting for the group of individuals that get to kind of pave the way for cricket in Wales, which is going to be really nice.
But just in terms of training and even the schedule, that must look a lot different this year to how it has in the past.
Yeah, it's a lot busier. There's a lot more commitment, both, when we are here, but actually for us kind of outside of when we're here, there's lots of the girls who are still at university or still, juggling jobs and having to, do those late night or early morning one-to-ones or training sessions or going to the gym. So that has been hard, and harder to manage alongside, going to work. But the group of girls that we've got here, we enjoy each other's company. Lots of us have played with each other for a long time, and our friends that cricket has brought us together and made us friends for life. So that kind of element makes it easier to turn up on those wet winter rainy days when it can be difficult. But yeah, that's the way the game's going to go. So like I said to you, it's a good stepping stone for us to kind of see where we are and where the game is going to be in a year and a half's time when we go into Tier 1.
Are you juggling a job outside as well?
Yeah, I'm still a teacher in Baysleg in Newport, which I absolutely love doing. But obviously trying to juggle that and juggle the training can be difficult. But the environment that we've created here at Glamorgan just allows, I feel comfortable if I've had a difficult day or whatever it is, that, everyone is accommodating of that and we work around that and we kind of, make sure that, I suppose I've learned to be able to switch off and compartmentalize and all those kinds of things, to be able to just come and train or play or whatever it might be.
I mean, especially this year, it must be quite a contrast teaching a full day and then the next day or the day after playing a double header at Sapphire Gardens.
Yeah, a little bit surreal in terms of last weekend to have pupils watching, cheering me on, asking me for my autograph. That even now, I remember saying to the pupil, actually, why are you asking me for my autograph? Because you see me 5 days a week, pretty much. To which we both laughed. But look, what the game has brought in and seeing the people coming in to watch us has been brilliant, phenomenal. We can't ask for any more support from the club and any more, from the fans that are coming in to watch us. It's been really nice.
Kind of to finish on, just looking ahead again to 2027, do you anticipate that players will want or be able to give up those jobs and become fully professional cricketers? And how difficult do you think that mind shift will be? I
think there's going to be lots of really exciting opportunities for people in the group to, take the next step. And I think those decisions, maybe it depends on people's circumstances, but lots of the girls in the group will have, been that 9-year-old girl who dreamed of being a professional cricketer who, will then get the opportunity, which is going to be incredible to see. So, yeah, I think there'll be lots of people wanting to grab that opportunity with both hands and you know, take their cricketing career on to whatever, you know, wherever they can.
Brilliant. Well, good luck tomorrow, Lauren, and catch up soon. Flora, great to have you on the show. You're currently the second leading wicket taker in the Tier 2 Blast competition. Your average reads a very impressive 9 exactly. Worcestershire started the competition with 4 consecutive losses, but you've now got 2 wins from 3, as well as an abandoned game since then. What's changed?
I think it's just all come together, to be honest. I think with T20, there's just no room for error. You start badly with a batting performance and it's very hard to recover. And then the last couple of games, we've really managed to start with a nice, good build from the start with the batting performance and then being able to just continue from there. And I think our fielding and bowling performance as a whole throughout the competition has been good. It's just been putting everything together into a game.
Did you notice like a standard difference in the T20 this year in the Tier 2 comp compared to in the Women's County T20 Cup? I mean, you mentioned the fielding there as well. That's often a big indicator of a standard difference.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe in the competition before, you'd have sort of maybe the top 2, you think, right, you got to switch on here, bowl properly here, and then you sort of relax a bit into it, as most teams only had maybe a top 3, top 4. But now the standards have improved. It's doing your research throughout the whole batting lineup and planning for the whole team. But definitely you know that in this competition you can't really have an off game. Maybe in previous years you might be able to have an off game and maybe still get away with it, but it's been so competitive this year. You've got to be do your best skills throughout the whole competition.
Has the data, just listening to you talk about doing your research, has the data and the kind of information been there for you to do the research into different players?
Yeah, so we have an analyst at Worcester who we get a stat package through before each game. And also we have access to MV Play where you can go and do your own sort of research, look at each batter for me or bowlers if you're batting and like make up your own and sort of plan to them. And I think that's really helped because it means I personally like to plan my fields before playing, and it just gives you more confidence to know what your plan is, go in and then execute the plan.
Yorkshire have obviously dominated the group, and that's kind of expected given the history and that they're going up to Tier 1 next year. Has that been frustrating in that they're still in this competition having a very, very good setup and it's kind of blocking out one of the spots for finals day almost?
Well, for me, I really enjoy playing Yorkshire because they've got the best team, they've got the best squad, the best sort of facilities and stuff. And I think that you just want to put your skills against the best players. The only difficulty is with this Tier 1 loan and Tier 2 loan system where I want to play against the best players, but some games their best players might not be playing against the other opposition. Sort of that's when it becomes quite difficult. But no, I've enjoyed playing against Yorkshire and having Yorkshire in, because I think when you're playing against a better opposition, I think your levels raise as well, and I think that's what you always want to do, is keep raising the levels in each league. So I think it's been good to have Yorkshire in this year.
Could you expand on just what that Tier 1 loan system is between the two tiers? Because I don't think people understand just how kind of flexible the gap is in the two tiers.
So you can have a player who's sort of registered to either a Tier 1 team or a Tier 2 team, and then they can go and play in the Vitality Blast in Tier 1 or Tier 2. And if there isn't a fixture clash, then they're able to play in both leagues. But obviously there are fixture clashes. So say Worcestershire versus Leicestershire, we'll have a Tier 1 player, say, playing. But then if we're playing, I don't know, Derbyshire, we might not have a Tier 1 player because they're playing for their Tier 1 side. So it just means that there's a few players coming in and out. So therefore, those players are getting sort of double the games and stuff like that. But I think it is good to have the Tier 1 players playing in Tier 2 because, again, it's raising the standard throughout, and it shows, especially we've got a young side, shows levels that you want to get to. But then it becomes difficult when it's not sort of a consistent, the consistent players playing, which may open up teams looking very different when their Tier 1 players are in compared to when they're not.
I guess as well, when you think about that, it's almost similar to when, like, in Tier 1, the England players come back in, and then
Exactly.
the Tier 1 players who have been playing
Yeah.
aren't playing. So you have girls stepping out of sides and not getting game time inconsistent.
Yeah. And I can imagine that's quite difficult if you're in a team that has a lot of sort of Tier 1 players coming back or Tier 2 players going in, sort of thing, where it is difficult to, you sort of know you're not playing when those players are coming back, no matter what your performance is. But as of playing against the opposition, again, it is nice to be playing against sort of the best, some of the best players in the league when they're playing. So, but yeah, it must be difficult to have that in and out sort of structure. And also for Worcestershire, we've now got like a block of players who are going to be almost playing throughout the season now, which is nice because you sort of build that team, you build the know each other inside out. So that must also be quite difficult with players coming in and out.
For our listeners who perhaps aren't or can't be across the vast reaches now of women's domestic cricket in England, could you talk a little bit about your backstory and how you got into cricket? Because you started out for Sussex, right?
Yeah, so I was born in Sussex. Went to notice cricket when I was at primary school. Went to play like many young girls. Went to play in the boys' side, and then went for sort of Sussex trials at the age of sort of 12, 11, no, even younger than that, actually, sort of 9, 10, and then was in the like Sussex setup till about 18, 19 years old. And then I went up to uni in Worcester and got the opportunity to go and play for Worcester. And yeah, that's just, I've been so grateful for Worcester because I've been playing there since then, basically. And I've been so grateful for the opportunities they've given me. And still now I'm doing a PhD researcher at the moment. So I do that in the weekdays, and then, which they're really understanding about, as long as I get my training in, S&C done. And then I drive up to Worcester or wherever it is on the weekend to then play games. So yeah, it's busy, but I'm just again really grateful for Worcester allowing me to sort of pursue both pathways at the moment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your PhD because it's in neuroinflammation, right?
Yeah. So
What is that?
So basically, it's like like if you get a hit on the leg, you're going to get inflammation and swelling. So in Alzheimer's disease, which is the disease I'm looking at, you have this neuroinflammation within the brain, which heightens all the cognitive decline, etc., and the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So I'm looking at what might be the causes of that and sort of the mechanisms that might happen, which might be working in that way.
And what could that lead to for you and a career going forward?
So I could look to do like a postdoc and continue in research. And so at the next summer, I'm hoping to pass my PhD. So I'll be doctor with a PhD, and then I'll hopefully carry on the research with a postdoc. And then, yeah, it could really lead anywhere. It could go into industry or stay in academia. So still quite open at the moment. But yeah, I'm really lucky to be doing both, to be honest.
Did there ever come a point where you thought you might have to choose, or did you ever choose to not pursue a career further down cricket in order to prioritize your studies?
I think I've never really made the big choice of which way it's going to do. I've sort of just, things have just happened and fallen into place a bit. I'm quite a big believer, and don't like to plan too far ahead. I just go with what's sort of happening. But I think if I was asked when I was younger what I'd want to do, it would be like to play cricket, but you have to sort of adapt, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But playing in this sort of semi-professional sort of setup at the moment, it's just almost scratching both itches at the moment. So it's been really nice. But yeah, at the moment, my focus is on both, to be honest. So I'm just sort of seeing what happens, really, and trying to do my best in both sort of scenarios.
The setup obviously looks very different now from what it did when you were coming through. Do you think if this was the setup when you were younger, you might have gone down a different path?
Yeah, I think so. There were much more opportunities, but again, you've got to be selected. You've got to be sort of thought to be good enough, sort of thing. So you never really know what would happen. And yeah, but it's so nice to see people like Phoebe Brett, who's come through the Worcestershire setup, even back when I started, like Arlott, who've then gone to Warwickshire and now playing into the 100 sort of thing. So both of them are sort of different age ranges, I'd like to say. But yeah, maybe you never really know what might have happened. But you can get a bit sort of like, oh, wish those were around when I was younger, sort of thing. But again, you just got to go with what's in front of you. And at the moment, I'm really enjoying playing for Worcestershire. And if anything happens from that, then it does. But if it doesn't, I'm very happy doing my research as well. So
doing research and then going and playing a T20 Blast doubleheader at New Road.
yeah, it's when going up to, I remember just starting and we went, the first game was Headingley away, and it was like, okay, I've just been in the lab for the sort of 5 days straight looking at tiny little cells, and now I'm got to switch on and play at Headingley, which like test venue and stuff. So it does keep you quite grounded, because you can't have time to sort of dwell on either bit, and both bits when things are going wrong, it can be tough. So yeah, it does give you sort of a bit of a headspace either side of it, because you can't be focused on what's happened in the lab when you're about to bowl in front of Lauren Winfield-Hill, and the same as when you're doing the lab, you can't be thinking what field you're going to be setting to them as well. So yeah, it does give me that nice headspace as well.
You were playing in the T20 County Cup for years before the tier system was introduced.
Yeah.
How has this season been different for you? How has the training and the match prep looked different?
Yeah, so the first thing to notice is that we've got a load more people around us. So we've got a physio, we've got, as I said, an analyst, we've got 2, sometimes 3 coaches on a day. We again get all the prep we need. We have a strength and conditioning coach who sends us our plans throughout the week. So it's just a lot more, there's a lot of people, more people around the setup. On a game day, again, it's not that different, because it's down to your prep sort of. It's always been at Worcester down to sort of what do you need to do to prepare for your game. So that hasn't changed too much. But again, the standard again has just really increased, and you can notice that throughout training with having we've now got a really nice mix of some really, really experienced players and some really sort of young academy players. So which both bring impotence to the squad. And drive up the performance. But yeah, again, going back to you can never really have a bad day in the T20 Blast, whereas in the County Cup you might get away with it, but we're playing sort of good teams every week. So I think that's been the real difference, to make sure that we're performing week in, week out. And I think maybe that has been the step up with the consistency is going to come, because it is a change to be able to just have to keep a level consistency, whereas before you could sort of have a really good day and then maybe hide a bit, and it's that's the big difference, I think.
And that step up in coaching and staffing and training and facilities, is that something you think is when you go and play other sides, is that consistent across the competition, or is that something Worcester particularly have invested in?
I think it's different between each side. So again, it always goes down to money, who has put the most money into it. And then Yorkshire, they have probably more backroom staff than they have squad players when you go and see them, and that's just because they've invested a lot and they're preparing for their tier 1 venture. But no, looking at most squads, they mostly have a physio, S&C there, and 2 or 3 coaches, so that's quite sort of baseline. And yeah, that is the big difference. And also having sort of the camera, their live stream happening all the time, that's the other big difference. So you can watch back everything. But it seems to be, I think we've only played once where there hasn't been a live stream, and that was but mostly we played sort of either at the county ground or the second 11 ground, which has been really, really nice.
Does that ever make you self-conscious as a player, maybe not used to being on a live stream? So are you aware of the cameras being there?
I have to be honest, sometimes I wish I was a bit more aware of the cameras being on. But I think for me, once I'm on the field, it doesn't really matter where I'm playing. Once you're bowling a ball, you could be playing club level, you could be playing on the beach, you're still sort of just bowling a ball. So you do forget about the cameras being there for sure. And I think for me also, especially that first game at Headingley, it wasn't until sort of I came off, I was like, oh gosh, we've just played at Headingley. Do you know what I mean? Sort of, that's when it sort of sinks in. But when you're playing, you're sort of so focused on just your skills and what's going on and within the game, you sort of forget the sort of outside stuff that's going on.
Well, I was going to finish up with playing at big grounds. You played the first double header at New Road last week, I think it was. That must have been an incredible moment.
Yeah, so nice. And it's Worcester again have put so much support into the women's game for us, for me personally, and for the team. And it was just so nice to see like little kids there, like wanting to come and like sign autographs and things like that, which is just really nice to see. And then playing with the men afterwards, seeing the crowd sort of grow as the game went on. But unfortunately, because it was quite a short game, the crowd didn't get as big as it normally would. But yeah, it's especially for people like Claire Boycott, who's been, and Jess Humby, who've been at Worcester since they were little girls and stuff, to be able to go out and play in a double header like that, I think is just perfect for them. But yeah, it's lovely to play a big grounds, and everyone who plays sports competitive, so you want to be at the highest level you can be, and that's sort of nice to show by you're here now. So I think drives up your performance as well.
Amazing. Well, good luck for, well, hopefully not last match in the competition, but last match in the group stage later this week.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you so much for doing this today.
So we are about 10 days away from the first ever Blast finals day. Surrey have qualified directly to the final. Second plays third, and Surrey will obviously play the winner of that game in the final. The final day is at the Kia Oval. Still some tickets available, I'm told. I'm with Surrey keeper bat Kira Chathli today. Kira, great to have you on the show. Surrey top of the table. What's gone so well for Surrey this season?
Hi, well, firstly, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I think so. It's probably fairly self-evident that we've got kind of a very strong batting lineup, and I think we've scored a lot of runs. We put a lot of runs on the board throughout the competition, but in the last few games, I think the shift that we've started to see is our bowling plans have sort of come together. We've got the sort of tactical elements right, and bowlers are executing their plans more often than not. So I think if we can perform like we have been doing, we'll be a tough team to beat for that top spot.
One of the notable things comparing the squads is just how many players Surrey have used this season compared to a lot of the other teams, and obviously that comes from a good place in terms of a lot of Surrey players earning international recognition. What's that like inside the dressing room as someone who plays throughout the tournament, dealing with a group of players who take the field being different game to game?
Yeah, I think potentially, it could be fairly chaotic, but I think it's kind of been as smooth as it can be. Obviously, it's fantastic getting the England girls to come back. And what they've done so well is kind of fit in with the culture that we're trying to create. And that kind of comes from our head coach, obviously there every game. Our captain, Bryony Smith, has been there most games, and sort of the leadership group around her has kind of remained the same. So I guess that kind of helps with the consistency and messaging and the way we want to go about things. And credit to the girls who have come in and out, not just the England girls. They've kind of really jumped on board with the plans that we've set.
What are the most important things around the team culture? Because obviously it's a new team. How much does it lean on what existed at the Stars, and how much of it is fresh in 2025?
I think it is fairly similar, but instead of sort of the entire team kind of coming up with our values or that kind of thing, it was kind of the leadership group, and we had a few meetings and sort of said, what do we want to keep from the Stars, and what do we want to sort of add as something kind of new, and most things sort of staying committed and being united as a team remained consistent from the Stars. But what sort of we've taken from the men's side of Surrey as well is that competitiveness, and that not quite expectation, but that drive that we want to win. So competitiveness is kind of one of our values now, and we've definitely embodied that. So some consistencies and a couple of new bits for the new season.
How you've been part of Surrey for a long time. How different does it feel this year compared to what it was like in the pre-regional days, even in terms of how joined up everything is and how much it feels like one club?
I mean, I really enjoyed the Stars. I think the setup was really helpful, the regional setup, but I just think now that we've gone back to the county structure, it feels like we have a home. We have like the men's team, we're kind of one club, like two teams, one club is our kind of messaging. But not just that, we get to work in an environment where we meet loads of different staff who all work for Surrey, and it's just really interesting to see how driven and passionate everyone is, not just sort of a playing group. So it feels more like a home, and it just feels a little bit more serious, which is a good thing.
And the cricket itself, how does the cricket on the field compare this year to 2024?
I think everyone's got a lot better. I think Yeah, so I think the standard has gone up, and the fact that we can now have overseas players, and that's a lot more common and frequent, just will drive the standard up. And obviously we want to be competing at a similar standard to what the 100 will be. And I think we're definitely heading in that direction with the domestic structure being as it is now. I think there's going to be more England players produced out of it because the standard is definitely going up.
You mentioned the overseas players. What's it been like sharing a dressing room with Grace Harris?
Really good. I was very excited for it. I didn't really know what to expect because I think we've all seen those videos of her, hitting the ball for 6 with a broken bat. So I didn't know what to expect, but she's great to have around, like really positive energy, very funny as a person, but also fantastic just to, chat through batting tactics. So I've been batting in and around in a similar position to where she is. So it's really just interesting just to pick her brain. Even before I go out to bat, I'll be like, what sort of guard are you thinking? What would your plan A be to this kind of bowler? So yeah, really positive and a great person to have around the changing room.
Well, it's been a really good season so far. Best of luck on finals day, and a reminder that some tickets are still available July 27th at the Kira Oval. That is everything for today's show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.